Doc, do you perchance have any idea of e-learning, and how do you intend to optimize or upgrade that e-learning?
Can you expatiate?
E-learning.
Appointment ekoso ayemanko for appointment Mahama amemwe mu wa tibe yi no anya bi na jawabwa amagana akonanim na wei na opanyini bi akotena doctor eye apak o yeso wo kirekirem e-learning onko kirem una wo se yatimi designative edi amase minister for education ko ne ntoto wa no ne kiremu kire Ghana for ade cropotin ade position yi se onsa abaye afele papa nkiremu nkire nkofo se e-learning ye de a boy.
Doc, do you perchance have any idea of e-learning, and how do you intend to optimize or upgrade that e-learning?
Can you expatiate?
E-learning. So this is where, unless you want me to define what e-learning is to you.
Yes, I'll be most grateful.
Well, e-learning is using technology to provide education to the pupils or to the students. And that also even includes digitalization and the use of technology.
When you e-learning crowd and says one conquer minister, you yate, ye de benny day. Now, NDC for you to know, maybe na jaw. Yes, maybe the Joyce, ye Dumas, ya kwa command appointment. So, must not call diaspora and quay no maybe ho. NDC for you to eat your mumuni ye kum or major, a mammy nu anakasa. Oh, mubu for ye pa. Some Mahama and she no way, this assistant name for an itch na ya, Miss Andy's no muguno.
Asem kesi be say Francis. Video we mama o manpanyina sonte. Se frema shows me say appointment no dia ma Joselyn Dumas no on revoke. Na all 24 hours to do so. Yes, do yam do poto mani fie no nchi so di bom. Na esisen e na nipa e fa ye kra ni pedua. Intwa for 8 years. Yenyina mu nkasa e ma wo power. Now be my positioner or the positioner kwa koma Joselyn Dumas senti. So ye kokko or hips into dien. Who is she? A bra ye kasa fix the country no. Or not sure catch say ye fix yourself. Na se ye fix the country e di waba power na o ma tumia. A bra ye wo enipa wo mo di o mo life, o mo time, o mo energy. Ama wetima ba power. Joselyn Dumas was nowhere to be found. As a matter of fact, me menya politics, menya me hu fin. What the man is so libertarian in Tiana. As he said, the tribalism. And ebeye Dumas. 24 hours, Mr. President, revoke this appointment. No. 24 hours, Oman Penyini, revoke it. She doesn't deserve it. Your appointment be what the man would deserve. Na sababa wa winkwa de yempene. Yempene mane meye diaspora, deputy diaspora affairs. For who? Who is she? Abba. You know what they say na me? Adei. Eni penny wa omenya sa position ana. Ana ye di nipa eni omo fama me. Seba mami bia me bom dua. Because 8 years my bre papa. Say senti any day position we ebe ma Joselyn. Why na nye ne humfucho na o wi metna ho no enjoy.
Before say ye be campaign na me di meni monyam ni me ko ni monyam ba app we so no. Me ka kire say excellency John Mahama do be na sanya ye be ka kire no. To say we president yako e ma na ba betena akonwa no so. His Excellency, with all due respect, some appointments be wa enye fe. Joselyn, wa mo na omo kwa akon so just na mo do omo kwa akon and the position aba mo dey ma reserve for na omo manko bi no. Ah? Joselyn Duma campaign be na oyeye. Menti se waka ye zukura eyeza. Diaspora fe, oba da to yokurom ha. Adai ye won crofo mu ye campaign twen wo mu position His Excellency wo yi woni ase wo hu ye obodu ada akon wo he mami ewia esumu ojemu na mami nemu no di ni sika top t-shirt credit akese sita bense mu wo hono mu ye hu adwuma mu nyina ye wo mu fra broche be betena Ghana KOD ede no ye wom ah senior Uma will be a Venice communication one na ye kan na we wom no His Excellency, with all due respect, please some appointment where they tell ah na kume wood for no mo de makodi 2k mutimi protest on and I say one go school tia yet me ma post bia Mr. Beautiful eso oni ma dia I say ma Mr. Beautiful bibia na ah na Joselyn Duma Na me hu sa akwala bi nso ye se ya ma ni post.
Dumas.
Obo de da akumu nyina ate wo. Sa akwala wo de wa de no ye. Dia de e no ye. Hey! Man hwe ya on. Ga yempenifo no na nam ho no mo no. Ye hu wo mo. Ye hu wo mo ebukwa na e hwe wo mo. I say we say Joselyn Dumas only the kwa le twama wo. Ke odi kwa de say me hu say no na number bi. Joselyn Dumas e dey there. And final advisor to the president but as I we there yempen so with all due respect. Ye wini aba no pe me hu ne ma bi na ekoso. Ye wini aba na ye inauguration no. Me hu nkrofo a na wotete ho. Ye nyina e kan we tim say oh say na ye wini dia Ghana na wini na yakọ. Ya hwe ye won nkrofo a ye wini aba no ene ye hu say oh mo ye NDC fo. Omo de ye mo pese omo do mo ni manya ba betoto fo mo hu. Ene ye won nkrofo a obeti say to me mo Grace mo Same mo anyone just name the Rita mo ye friend say mini agenda Alexa go mo like a lot of people. To me mo Tila ye de ni to na ehwe mo. Adey. Empenifonya ya de mankwala. Apanyinu so ye confident. Me da me twa body ada ko ye friend say any honorable sita be me twa wo sita be post ko se hu se ni da ho bi ya akoba bi. Ye nchi ase ye ntwe obo ebi wo ho obi mu nti na ye ku ye ho. Ye ku ye ho. Adey menene. Abba His Excellency. One guy appointment to Joselyn Dumas and they would like of state to do ba mu santa ba. Kaya kana wo shesu kwa ka wani case na ba mu ya mukama akuma abba gasu baba sadik duka suna zum ne babu baba sadik enim de say de oye ade
de ade no wanka se oti hu a ye yi wayi bone ene se de da ho nso eno no boys mienu nam de obutwa to mamo omo so hiti pa omo se sa ya chiu se hia se Hajj se hwan ne ekosi ne de ne Mahama ne nsore ne mpa bu kri no boys na adwa brutal obetimi do comment egu comment section amanfo ani abro yan asem keto na mom kai so be like page no na kai so be subscribe for more videos also.
Mr. President, Akwa cut short for a new Hajj hall or whatever. And made up President Akosia. I solely 7 doors for my way. Why? I didn't say, or maybe was as we sure, or building on my because of Namasumon. Monkan say, go to Israel today. Israel, there are Ghanaian foreign citizens getting scholarship to go to Israel to go and learn how to do agriculture. Israel. And we are here holding hands. That's a Bible. Any as of to me, and can glow, can another buy and can you fish, Mr. President. Don't deceive yourself, Mr. President. Please, we don't do respect. Some of us we sacrifice our life, the happiness of our family. My mother cried 25 times in jail. Asasi papa ewia boy nsuo toye rivers kuguye cheche ye didn't need to galamsey and these idiots were in this country watching it. And now what? Come on, Mr. President, don't disappoint some of us. Because we forgo everything. We let go of our family, our friends. We were mocked. I have slept outside on the street. You know why? Because we believed that we needed leadership, and with good leadership, this country will bounce back to track. Ghanaians never voted for NDC. Neither the Ghanaians voted for John Mahama. They voted for a leader, and that is who you are. Wake up as a leader. Act like a leader. Be the lion. When you go to the forest, and you're lion, you know, you're the strongest, and you know, you're the smartest, and you know, you're the intelligent, but he is the leader of the jungle, as we all talk about. Mr. President, rise up above it all. This mind games, I know some of them you listen and
he believes in God.
he believes in Jesus, that's okay. I have no problem with that. Now, Siyama Mampeni John Mahama and Tia say, I saw for na o sheshia wono eya too much. Na se Mampeni John Mahama anya careful I saw for no bedum nija. Share, I saw for wrong. They have mastered the art of quenching your fire. I saw for no eba say psychologically no yenum obija yen turning a lion into a rabbit. They have mastered the art. Now, so for now, Mampeni Mahama sheshia no abribiano worshiping with the clergy. Now, so for ne kwana nim yes also ben panos listen now why say Mampeni John Dramani Mahama le careful ombedum nija ama botaya na edana ni so say obano obechi enkwasiafo bia gum obechi akromfo bi e dia set example a reset Ghana no. Se Mampeni Mahama anya careful la ontimi ge egetia asofo no bedum nija because asofo no omu ye criminals yanti Ghana ha and at the same Nanka Williams ekojina Blaster Square and I hear blah and I hear bonfire ye $1 and I hear bonfire and inflation and I hear bonfire na baomi and I hear bonfire empire or boy ye ebe na ye say $1 to almost 20 Ghana cedis. Eko si saying, if I hear about it, not about me, also the Namachire, and I, my Jumada at the Bank of Ghana, the money is there, and I did and Kwasia Kika and Kwasia Assembly, and they are Manan and Kofuya too. Mampeni Mahama, but it was said Mampeni Mahama edit the nice form. A campaign bonqua, dear. Ghanaians are praying for Mampeni John Dramani. Maybe say that we are me bompire the Mampeni John Dramani Mahama NDC abai say let them succeed. Mampeni John Dramani Mahama oyere or bompire mount. Oma Sharaf, your friend say Farida bompire mount on daily basis. Ghana for etie loud silence media. Ghana for a free mind family Ghana. They always remember you in their prayers. The Muslim community, the Christians, traditional believers, everybody, because Ghanaians believe in your leadership and Ghanaians believe so much in your presidency. E can pay what only problem. Mampeni John Dramani Mahama, e can to me pay your DDN no nyanko pon de asha won say wie. Unya obi bia hwe biem. Ghana force be ye ne say for nice form na setting a precedence ema Ghana for nantia say ye the almighty misha won sa ontimi yusu emfa wreck the nation dry now we are wa fa wadi enutina se mo study pa o ade ba ko ama Ghana for any edge Mampeni John Dramani Mahama membo hu ne say oba ye oral team no eduma oye o declare for be wanted no and I'm so and ama Ghana for enya didie kase pa Mampeni John Dramani Mahama ema empo se ne ya ye kase ye sa to aba percentage of Mampeni John Dramani Mahama enya ye in 2024 will go higher. Why? The rating asako high because of Sadia na oye no. Mampeni Mahama Emma Ghana software enumuja.
Voter region hono member of parliament the man of Tomu Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa Mr. Holier than thou ononko an on the opega na yi ononko an onim papa ononko an onim yetene nwumrei ewia nwumrei SMP TV ensa kan video bi chese awreho asefem na eni branso aba Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa na NDC supporters CB ebi free voter region ebi free Ashanti region ebi free Accra eno mu nyina akwa mu ewo ministries with the hope say omo mrahye bedwani ya na NDC ni mapaya on there bibia wagyeegyinem say Ghana ha de on dwene Ghana fo ho on dwene timamufo ho abiri bia waye krado say obeye niema de aboa wo no komo kɔ no ho eno na akwa kodi nkomo e de omo nsem bi akwa koto nanim na mrahye bedwani omo bi de boa wo mo a wahye na waboa wo na areho sem ne se de Okujeto Ablakwa esi titi ne hugu wo so twifa wo so kese wanhwe o manum po no o mankasa wanti o masem o monsem kra na wanchia wansere anhwe o manim puha chifa omoso kokotena ne kam kan ne ka gate hwim pan catch driver ne say driver tia so ne enko avum driver no etu eye Rolls Royce car you say Chrysler so otu ya o de kwa kese NDC supporters no penifo mu gina hono no say e dey na papa yi o peso chiri ene omu bufu ye pa roche no say kebe ya omu timi na keka nsin bat omu ye ya anye yi na in the video no oti se Samuel Kyei-Duah Blakwa enka kire NDC supporters yi say se mo pesa mo ne me kasa me no obi ankasa wa hano o peso oni mi di nkomo a ko ne koko book appointment ko book appointment ansa na o peso oni mi hia oni ma hia e no mo say MP da ben na wo chance ye book appointment abey na wo chance ye ka kire say ma wo me book appointment unya ma ba mu nya sa na wo ne kan ye o ka kire say mo de mo ba the MPP 4 years we book appointment wo Kyei-Duah Blakwa me be make allegation say cash for president ube 2 years kan sa not me book appointment kwa ko president na mo de mo ba mu ntimi nya sa mo ya hobrasiefo you are not arrogant ntimi nya sa den na wo ba ye uni 3 months kra ye kasa ho a wo so ntie tie de pese ye kan so wo mfie nya ha ne no be kasa mo konko book appointment say ode won sample na e kire o hwe ni ni kasa NDC supporters si omumunu ya kum o se kai ye din sem hunu sabi ya hwe ya de eba no ani soso na in the video what is any supporters ne kasa hey politicians as I said the NDC fanatics and the NDC apparatchiks womu a Kyei-Duah Blakwa the numerous exposés any allegations no ma ne ye almost say ebia oba to seek their welfare na say no so no relate no sa no so no ba be relate no enye sa akora na e ba beko na mu ba ko na abetro e dey atum social media say so my minister can't serve me unless I come to his office. Can he be of service to all Ghanaians if we decide to book an appointment with him? Didn't he answer an oath to serve the Ghanaian people at all times? Wait, no questions. So much as you so Kyei-Duah Blakwa. No Kyei-Duah. What didn't see I can tell say at all times? All means all. Whether it's at your convenience or it's at your inconvenience, you are going to make time to serve the good people of Ghana. And then umpoye NDC for yaba honoma hwenungwasia waguyi hwedwea wadane de de ankyere aye omo ye pa so Kyei-Duah Blakwa umpoye free Volta region tidal waves ya eba eseye dan NPP time yetinsem akaye de evom ni de anim o kan ya ma wiase nyina ati se mpo NPP for na mfa ye ho tiro ma ma boyen ya ukromu for ya bampo se no ba be kasa enka tie ye mpo ne passe bi ka kire ye Kyei-Duah enfi wo mo so mu yinipa ayure ho o mi ehwe video no na afi so Samuel Abugina po ene ye wan fa ne ho ankyere kora John Mahama yanko ni ngore
how do I get an appointment and come to the office? How do I get an appointment and come to the office?
President Mahama has formed arguably one of the biggest or largest governments in the history of our country as it relates to the cost on the national exchequer. Mr. Speaker, why do I say this? Take for example, the president has appointed Dr. Valerie Sawyer as senior presidential advisor in charge of government affairs. Her rank is a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of parliament. So her salary, her emolument, conditions of service, everything to do with her office is at the same rank as a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of parliament. The Speaker, he's appointed a presidential advisor on economy, appointed presidential advisor for 24-hour economy, presidential advisor in special aid to the president, presidential advisor on national anti-corruption program, presidential advisor on diaspora affairs. Mr. Speaker,
He goes on to appoint presidential advisor, presidential staffer, and special aide to the vice president, presidential staffer for Black Star Experience, and then presidential staffer for diaspora affairs. Mr. Speaker, then he goes ahead to appoint 5 policy advisors to the vice president. Mr. Speaker, he tells the country that he's appointed a minister in charge of agribusiness, and yet he's appointed director at the presidency in charge of agriculture and agribusiness. My good friend Peter Buama Otukono. Mr. Speaker, he says he will not appoint deputy regional ministers, and he appoints 16 presidential staffers in charge of the 16 regions of our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to submit that these presidential staffers in charge of the 16 regions of our country, in essence, as it relates to the cost on the national exchequer, are in fact, indeed, and in substance, deputy ministers of state. Mr. Speaker, he then appoints, Mr. Speaker, listen carefully, please. Mr. Speaker, he then appoints 1 presidential advisor on media, 4 directors of communication at the office of the president, 5 deputy directors of communication, 2 communication specialists, 5 technical communication assistants, 1 media aide, 1 assistant media liaison officer, 1 communications consultant. I've done the mathematics, and I want to submit. I've done the mathematics that I want to submit, and I do this not from a partisan lens, but I do this as somebody who had the privilege and honor to serve as deputy chief of staff. I know how it works. In terms of the cost on the national exchequer, the president has appointed 100 ministers and deputy ministers. The president has established a ministry of youth development. I want to refer the House and my good friend, Honorable, I will tender all of this, Mr. Speaker. I will tender this. I will tender it. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable James Agalga, my very good friend, has talked about how the MPP government terminated some appointments. Mr. Speaker, assuming without admitting that even happened, shouldn't our governance move forward? Shouldn't we have good governance? And indeed, when we promise resetting, what does that mean? But Mr. Speaker, more importantly, may I refer the House, Mr. Speaker, may I refer the House to Article 191 of our national constitution, which states, and I quote, "A member of the public services shall not be dismissed or removed from office or reduced in rank or otherwise punished without just cause," end quote. Mr. Speaker, we are building a nation, and there are hundreds and thousands of people out there who have lost their jobs. I think our friends from the other side, the Honorable James Agaga, should join us to appeal to the president, just as he took an oath, Mr. Speaker, on the 2nd schedule of our national constitution, where he said, and I quote, "to protect and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana," end quote. Article 191 is a provision of the Constitution of Ghana, and the president is enjoined to indeed defend and protect this provision of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the president, in the same schedule, swore an oath to do justice to all manner of persons. Some of these people whose appointments have been terminated, some are NDC members, Mr. Speaker. Some are MPP members. Some are non-partisan. Some don't even know what happens in politics. And yet, a president who says he'll be father for all has terminated the appointment. When President Mahama was leaving office, Mr. Speaker, he appointed Mr. Joseph Whittal as the commissioner for Shraj. He appointed Joseph Nkrumah as chairman of NCCE. On 23rd December 2016, he appointed Daniel Domevilo as Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, it is not Abu Jinapor, or it is not the minority. It's not the minority, Mr. Speaker, who is giving the president names. No, Mr. Speaker, when you go out there on the streets, it's the Ghanaian youth who are talking about that. That the president promised to create jobs, and yet he's come And the talk on the street is that Mahama Bako terminations. The Speaker, and that is why they have named him. We haven't named him. The minority hasn't named him. They have named him Terminator number 1. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we call on the President to rise up to the occasion to jettison the promises, and Mr. Speaker, and honor his commitments of providing you for the Ghanaian people. What we heard on 27th was a message of lamentations and not a State of the Nation address. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the attention.
Honorable members, we now listen to Honorable Gideon Boaku.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the address that was presented to this House by the President. And Mr. Speaker, my good friend and classmate, the Honorable Felix Oposiko-Ache, made reference to what Professor Naafoli Sekefio said. And I also want to reference Professor Naafoli Sekefio. She said in one of her books that don't tempt me because I don't have the power to resist temptation. The honorable member has gone on a path of putting out some information and data in his attempt to rationalize what we describe as lamentations by the President, and in so doing, some misleading data have been put out. Mr. Speaker, it is important to establish that no government can run the full hog of his or her term without having to deal with some arrears in payments, some unfulfilled promises, and even in some cases, things that were not promised are delivered. But at the end of the day, analysts and scholars have given us indicators that measure whether or not the overall performance was good, moderate, or it was bad. And that analysis is akin to what a physician will do on a patient. You may walk to the hospital as very healthy, but the doctor through laboratory test is able to tell you, because of the level of your temperature, you have headache. And this is what the economists have done for us. And Mr. Speaker, I put this into context to indicate whether or not the economy that has been handed over to President Mahama and the NDC is an economy that is poorly managed or it is not. And the acid test to all of this in political decisions is what is the alternative. President Mahama is 2 months into his government, so we can only measure him in relative terms by comparing what he has inherited with what he left when he once had the opportunity to serve. Mr. Speaker, and I want to carry everybody along. Let's look at some of these indicators and make our own fair judgment, because this is a house of records. President Mahama and the NDC left office in 2016 with a real GDP growth of 3.4%. This is when the IMF had given a target of 5.4%, and even the previous year, 2015, was 4%. And yet, President Mahama ended up with a declined growth of 3.4%. Today, the economy that he says is not in good shape has growth for third quarter of 2024 of 6.4% and is going to exceed the IMF target of 4% by the end of the year.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Felix talked about fiscal deficit and said it measures the prudence in government expenditure, and I agree with him. They left office in 2016 with a non-rebased fiscal deficit of 9.3% and a rebased fiscal deficit of 6.5%. Today, the fiscal deficit is around 4.2%, leaving a deficit of 6.45% and the one who left a deficit of 4.2%, who has managed the economy better. But you see, that aside, the primary balance determines the fiscal health of any economy. And Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note that President Mahama left the economy in the health of the negatives, a primary deficit of 1.4%. Today, our deficit is, our fiscal balance, primary balance is in the surplus. So if you're talking about data, you have to support what you say with data. And interestingly, Mr. Speaker, Ghana has had an all-time high of primary balance of 1.59% in 2021. But shockingly, our all-time low in terms of our primary balance was recorded in 2014 under President Mahama. Wow. All-time low. Wow. Since independence. Primary balance, all-time low. Mr. Speaker, he talked about debt to GDP ratio. The debt to GDP ratio, non-rebase, when they left office, was 73%. The 55.6% they talk about is after the 2018 rebasing. Today, the non-rebase debt to GDP ratio is 72%. Yeah. It's lower than what you left in terms of non-rebase. Wait for next year when the statistical service rebases our GDP to see whether the debt to GDP ratio will not be below what we left. That is the most important thing. Mr. Speaker, again, our current account balance, which records your international transactions, including exports and imports, was in the deficit during President Mahama's time when he left office in 2016. Today, it is in the surplus. Mr. Speaker, our gross international reserves was 6.2 billion. Today, it is 8.9 billion. It covered 3.5 months of imports cover. Today, it is covering 4 months of imports cover. Which of these two is the best? And you talk about exchange rate depreciation. Yes, our cedi naturally had a characteristic feature of undergoing depreciation because of the regime that we practice. But they left an exchange rate depreciation from 2009 to 2016 of 72%. What President akufo-addo left is 71%. Which one is the best? Which one is the best? So that is important to note. Mr. Speaker, this is an indication. This is an indication that the economy is doing well. But Mr. Speaker, a relatively strong economy is what? It is the one that is able to provide infrastructure, that is able to provide jobs, healthcare, pay salaries, provide stable electricity, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, the government that President Mahama is inheriting has laid solid foundations. And Mr. Speaker, it is based on this solid foundation that the government has been able to reduce the number of young people who are not employed by 2.13 million. President Mahama has a responsibility to reduce that further. Today, we have seen the growth in the agriculture sector and our exports are increasing. That is why we are having a trade surplus. For the first time, we are recording trade surplus.